I'll let others talk.
There we go. Welcome, Andrew and Doppelgrau. I don't know if you can hear us or not. Oh, it's quiet over there.
You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Looks like their video is muted. I'm not sure about their audio yet.
I'm thinking Andrew's a robot because he's always got the exact same picture.
Yes, he does. I think it must be midnight for him where he is in Australia.
Yeah. No,
I think he's West Australia.
it's like tomorrow late afternoon, isn't it?
Oh, he'd be 24 hours or 12?
Across the timeline. Yeah, because I'm 7 hours from the timeline. And then another bunch. So I think it's like mid-afternoon tomorrow. It's hard to keep it straight.
On the 24th, yeah, that's tricky.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw the list there or not. I don't know if they can hear us yet or not. Maybe I'll chat with them in a minute. See if they're there.
Andrew has his mic muted.
There's Andreas.
Did I record this?
I'm recording it right now, so whether we record it or not. Hello, Andreas.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. If you guys are interested in talking, the mute button is on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and as well as your video button if you wanted to join in on the conversation. There should be a chat box screen on your right-hand side too. There we go.
Modern technology.
Hello,
Okay.
Andreas. Hello, Andrew.
Good night.
Okay, here I am. I have a short time because
Oh.
I have to work.
You have to go back to work. Okay.
Hi, Brian.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Oh, yeah, very fine.
This is going to be awkward at first.
Very.
Well, maybe we can just introduce ourselves for a moment and where we're from, and maybe what time it is where you are, and then we could dig in for a little bit if you guys don't mind. How about, well, I think we all know who Brian is, but I don't know if you want to say a little bit, Brian, or what? Sure.
I guess I started this party, so I appreciate all of you coming on to it and putting up with me. It's wonderful and kind of amazing where all of this has gone. But I know it's not a retail product, but it does have some neat features. And again, I really appreciate you guys, your feedback, and just troubleshooting it and telling me what's wrong with it. And then as we try to build this together, it's been a fascinating journey. And I really appreciate all what you guys have put into it. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Wilbert Talen, and I live in Prince Edward Island, Canada, so way on the east coast of Canada. And it's noon by me right now, so thanks all for joining us. I'm just here to learn and figure out what this is all about, and kind of a meeting of the minds. I'm excited about that.
Okay. I'm Andreas Ortner from Austria, Central Europe. Nice to see you. Yes, as I thought, I have only short time just to try out Zoom, and I hope you can hear us at the other time. I have the next 2 weeks have to work in a restaurant because it's carnival time. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Andrew, Western Australia. Just turned midnight on, it's now Sunday morning. So yeah, I might be a little bit out of it, but I'll listen in and hopefully we'll learn something.
And we have James Wolf there.
Yeah, I'm James Wolf, Wetaskiwin, Alberta. Same thing. I came here to learn as much as I could, that's for sure.
Neat. And Doppelgrau, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself or
yeah,
not.
I do. So Doppelgrau is my nickname in the forum, so I choose it here too. My name is Johannes Vormann. I'm from Germany. My day job is being a computer scientist, but I have a brother-in-law that is doing farming, and I've grown up near a farm, so I'm very interested still in the topic of farming. And after I've seen this great project from Ryan, I started doing a bit of a PCB because it might help my brother-in-law, and I found it a nice project for me for learning a bit of designing PCBs, because I wanted to do a bit more hands-on stuff than only shifting out bits and bytes all day. So that's the reason why I'm here. Sorry that I have no webcam, but on my desktop I currently have none set up, so you have you can't see me sitting there. But I'm from Germany, middle of Europe, and it's about tea time.
Very good. And in the bottom left of my screen, I have, is it Matthias there, MTZ 8302? Would you like to introduce yourself? It's quiet over there. How about Travis Friesen? Would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I've been interested in following this a bit. I'm just here to learn, I guess, what you're all doing.
Very good. I threw a couple of the topics I got from your survey responses on the Combine forum there. I don't know if we want to dig into any of those, but maybe Brian, did you have something that you wanted to talk about right off the bat?
Well, I think we're at the stage, like AgOpenGPS is at the stage where it's been out for what, 3 years now, and it's kind of stable, or like there really shouldn't be a lot more features. I mean, there's always going to be more features. I mean, that's just the nature of software. But I think that the major features are there, whether we move icons around or, you know, maybe fix a bug or fix these stupid offsets. I mean, offsets are unbelievably complicated. And those little updates aren't going to change the fact that you need an Arduino and a motor driver board and a power supply to run your auto steer. And I think that probably one of the most important things we could talk about is solid documentation of a particular way. And it's not completely simple, but as simple as we can kind of make it so that anyone attempting the project can do it and win at it. You know, there's nothing worse than taking a project off the internet and it's incomplete, or there isn't a parts list, or there isn't a schematic or that sort of thing, or if the schematic doesn't line up with the parts list. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. Hey, little fella behind you there, Wilbert. Right on. Well, we need all that and have a simple auto steer board, auto steer schematic, a parts list, how to install AgOpenGPS, and just kind of have a tutorial on how to basically have simple auto steer. I don't know how you guys think, but I think it's really at that point, and I think that that should be kind of number one, so that anyone attempting the project gets success in the project.
I think that's a great idea. So I guess the question would be, how do we go about it? Is there suggestions on how to do that? I know it was posted on the Combine forum earlier on. There was a way to do that through GitHub as far as making a stable version. And how would we get the documentation in place to do that? Do you think that would be a wiki thing that we can merge into that, or what's your thoughts there? I guess I'll throw that to everybody.
Well, I would say the main problem with the documentation is that even if it's needed and everyone is happy if there is a good documentation, nobody really likes writing documentation. At least it's my experience. The people that could write good documentation because they understand the project, they understand the users, they usually have a lot of other things in their minds or even on their to-do list. So the problem is these people don't usually really like to write good documentation, and the other people often cannot write really good documentation because they don't have well, I would say the broad view of the whole, and they start often, I think, would say, with a good intention, writing partial documentation that doesn't fit on the edges then very well because they don't see the whole view. So I think the main problem with a good documentation is that one or a few persons are needed that put on their head to say, well, I'm more or less responsible for the documentation now, and at least make some sort of structure where the rest can be put together. So they maybe, for example, if someone has a neighbor that wants to start and someone helps in starts documentation, what is needed, how to get there, and then you can, of course, you can broaden the picture and putting more information, but you need someone that has a good understanding, I would say, to make this starting point. And then we need someone who decides what is the reference setup. For example, I'm now playing with the AutoSteer PCB with the ESP32. Someone else is making one with the Arduino. From the pictures on the in the forum, I would say both looks great. Of course, I hope mine looks great too. But if you want to make simple how to, someone needs the authority, and I just don't want to look at some person here, but I think there is one person who has a bit of authority to decide what's the way for the reference setup. Because if I would start writing an example with the ESP32, then we have the problem that other people like Brian or Andreas prefer the Arduinos, and then we get well, the sort of unclear what's a real reference, because of course AgOpenGPS is open in the name and open source, so everyone can contribute, and if they have enough knowledge, make their own extensions or their own PCBs, own setups like hydraulic steering and whatever. But I think someone should say, well, this should be the reference, the basic reference setup that is more or less, yes, supported is a dangerous word for some sort of project like AgOpenGPS, but the reference setup where everyone can say, well, this should work. So the problem is, I think you have to agree to one reference, and then you have to find someone that can write good documentation. And maybe if like something like a step-by-step tutorial with well, some sort of tractor or something where you take some pictures and describe what you need to do when you need to do it.
I'd just like to say that I was going to update the wiki, but I've been following it on the Combine forum, and I can't decide when I should update it because it just seems like every week something completely new is happening to AgOpenGPS. So I have no idea when I should start, or if it's going to stop now at a stable version, and then I can start making a good complete list for auto steer. And like that end trip that's just been put onto AgOpenGPS, I have no idea about that even yet. I'd have to learn all about that before I could add that in.
I think that's a great idea as far as what Doppelbrau is saying. Maybe that's we should have maybe a dedicated wiki just for a stable version, or like a section on the wiki just for that. So that kind of like you have the dev version and the stable version initially. Maybe we should just separate things out like that on the wiki. That way all the documentation can be put there for the stable version, and then we can sort of copy and paste as needed into a development version.
Well, if I could throw something in, I think like the software is nowhere near as complicated, or there isn't as many versions as there is the hardware. I think the hardware can be hydraulic, it can be motor driven, you can use that little IBT2, you can use one of the Cytron controllers, and you can use MMA, like that sensor, you can use the dogs too, and it just like there's so many combinations and permutations of hardware stuff. So I don't know how you deal with all those different versions, and then now you need different I/O codes, and then you throw in the UDP stuff and the networking, and now you have all of those versions times 2, because now you can add networking to it. So I'm not sure how you deal with all these different versions. I think it's pretty complicated. Like on the, I don't know. Any idea how to deal with so many different hardware versions? Because I think the software, like I've created a development branch and a AgOpenGPS main branch, and the main branch will always be stable, and the development will occur in the development. But I don't see, like I was thinking last week or so, I've been thinking about, okay, what else do we want to add? And really, it's kind of, you can probably tell which one of my comments was on Combine Forum with boost trophy and decomposition and all these other things. But that's strictly for autonomous driving. So I don't think that belongs in AgOpenGPS at all in a lot of ways, because it makes that software then so very complicated for anyone who wants to just do auto steer. So maybe it should be divided up into Agribot and AgOpenGPS again. I'm not sure. Like, should the self-driving stuff be a completely different package of software? Like, I haven't really shared a lot of the circuitry or software for the self-driving stuff, just because it puts way too many buttons on AgOpenGPS when guys want to use a 768 display. You can't add 11 more buttons on that 768 display, because then it's just a display of buttons. And so that doesn't work either. So maybe have 2 versions of software, one with self-driving and one with basic auto steer. Take out the, like, I don't know if any of you tried the driving around obstacles. Has anyone tried that? Using an AB line? Yeah. That's pretty cool software. I can be so bold to say. I've had it running, and like I did farm conferences in 3 of the provinces, and I've always had it running on a television screen in the background. And yeah, people are kind of amazed that you can have a slew and then just automatically drive around it. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. But there is you can well imagine that there's an awful lot of computations going on in the background, keep that maze alive and doing the computations of driving around. And now you have a Dubins to a maze path, and then from the maze path back to another Dubins, and then back to the AB line. And then all the edge cases are where you're too close to something or you're too far away from something, and then that fails. And maybe in AgOpenGPS, it shouldn't even have that. I mean, should AgOpenGPS just be guidance and auto steer and Google Earth and that sort of thing? Like, should we limit what is in AgOpenGPS? So that's kind of a question to the group.
I think that's actually a really good idea. Just for most people that would like to use AgOpenGPS, all they really need is auto steer AB lines, head lanterns. That's like, I had an add-on Kijiji, and I was talking to everyone in there that's never heard of AgOpenGPS before, and they're just looking for something that would compete against, say, a Trimble or something. And everyone that's been calling me and asking about it has either never heard of AgOpenGPS, isn't interested, so I'm just referring them to the wiki, or they heard of it, but they're intimidated by the parts list and trying to connect everything together, right? And like I had put in the comments, I was just wondering how PCB development was coming along, and I think that would solve a lot of issues with the hardware side. Force everyone to use the same hardware after that. That's my thoughts anyway.
Well, I would say Brian has thrown up 2 different questions. The first one was how to deal with the 100 different combinations of hardware. And there I would simply say, at least for the wiki, just reduce it to 1 or 2 combinations that is, as I said before, more in quotation supported. So you say, for example, one setup with Arduino over USB, and one, for example, with ESP32 over Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And these are the only 2 versions you document, and then you tell the people, choose one of these and you are fine, and not, well, you have this combination of 100 different combinations, and yeah, you have to modify this or that. You can leave that for advanced users that have someone who's, well, has some computer science study, or at least have fun studying computer science stuff. And the other question about the software features itself, I'm afraid I haven't looked too deep in the AgOpenGPS software itself, but maybe you could try to use some sort of package this, so you can use some parts identically for an AgOpenGPS auto steer and software, and the same software parts somehow isolated for AgRobot software. So you have different user interfaces, but for example, the auto steer part might be possible to share between those 2 versions. So you don't, on the long run, there have to be, even if you have 2 different user interfaces for the functionality that is being shared, that can be shared in software too. But I don't know how much work it is, because I have just looked once in it when I was trying to debug the entry issue. So I don't know if it's very good or bad, or it's really hard work, because I haven't used so much Visual Studio and all this Windows stuff. So I don't know if that's a possibility, or it's easier to say, well, let's separate at some point, and do it different. But to get back to the hardware, I would say, yeah, I think for documentation we have to reduce the number of possibilities, because if you put all the different possibilities we have now on the table, then either way we get an incomplete documentation or documentation that a beginner never understands. So either way, I would say we reduce it to 1 or 2 setups, and we say, if you take this recipe and stick to the instructions, you're fine, or you should be fine. And if not, if you don't want or can stick to this recipe, well, you have to put in more effort or ask someone who has more knowledge. And there, the problem is with choosing those 2 versions is the problem who decides which versions should be documented. And I think there we have 2 possibilities. We say, well, the first one who documents 1 or 2 good versions wins. So they make the reference because, well, they have done the effort, and if the effort is good, then they made the reference set up. Or we say, or someone with some sort of authority, and again, I don't want to mention any name, might say, well, my suggestion is supporting A and B, and then I think it's quite easy to agree on this.
Thanks.
I wonder
Go ahead, Brian.
I wonder who that is.
I just gonna go back to your question, Brian. What AgOpenGPS should do in future? I think it should be the section control and the rate control is for Europe very important, because everyone talks about reducing fertilizer and things like that. So I think this is very important. And Wilhelm Eder already wrote a connection to existing hardware like Rauch fertilizer spreaders and Müller electronics. And so he did a piece of software in between, like AgOpenGPS and these commercial systems. So if you buy such a spreader, you can reduce your costs by using AgOpenGPS. So I think this is a very important future.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I just want to maybe bring things back a little bit. It seems like we're pointing fingers to you, Brian, there a little bit, but I think in general, we don't feel like we have the authority to say which direction things should go in. Maybe like we could maybe take a survey of what everybody's thoughts are and going that way. And then as far as a defined hardware list or which 2 stable versions we should have. And then from that point, you could make the ultimate decision and say, this is the hardware list that we should have. And then we can develop the PCB from there. That might be a suggestion, or maybe a suggestion would be to create some kind of a AgOpenGPS board, for lack of a better thing. But I hate to make things too formal at the same time.
Well, I've been doing this, what, 3 years now, and I've used the, I'm assuming I probably have the most experience and amount of acres that something has done, and I've used the Arduino Cytron controller, and it's just ridiculous simple setup, 2 7805 regulators and a Cytron board and Arduino driving the motor, and it's been upgraded by the host. Hey, it now includes unlimited minutes.
Yeah, for the first meeting we get unlimited, so looks like we're good.
Cool stuff.
I mean, my vote is pretty simple. Like, the Arduino is a good platform to start with because, again, I'm pretty sure you guys know where my focus is, and it's on learning and teaching and sharing ideas. And it's less about the hardware and specifically what works the best, but it's more about, hey, you know, a lot of farmers are picking up Arduino and holy cow, this thing can do a lot, and it costs $3. And I think for a base system to be an Arduino and its amount of information on the web and other projects, and you search Arduino on YouTube, and there's so many cool, simple projects with so many tutorials and that sort of thing. I think if the intent of this project is for farmers to learn about embedded controllers and their use, to me, the answer is kind of obvious that we just use the Arduino, like the Nano, because the thing is so useful. And anything you do on the Nano pretty much applies to the Uno too. To have an INO that you just put on the Nano and use it, hook it up, and hook it to two wires to a motor controller, and plug in your USB to your computer, and hook the 2 wires from the motor controller to your steer motor, you've got auto steer. Like, it's hard to argue with that, you know, as a base system. Like, that's pretty darn simple. And those Cytron controllers are available in every country, like Robot Shop, and yeah, maybe they cost a little bit more than the IBT2, but they have a connector. They come with a connector and wires on them. It's not like an 8-pin, you know, like or a, what is it, a 5x2 DuPont connector like on the IBT2, which right away makes it more complicated, because now what do you do with an 8-pin or a 10-pin connector? And the Cytron, again, is designed to work with the Arduino, and you only need 2 wires. So unless someone's got a really good argument against just using an Arduino and a Cytron controller and a simple power supply, I'd sure like to hear that argument, but it doesn't limit anyone from using the ESP. But again, this basic auto steer system is really simple and basic. And or like I say, when I originally came up with the idea, is like, how simple can I make this thing? And holy crap, can you ever make it simple? And so is that okay? Is that like a simple power supply, like a 5-volt supply, and the Arduino Nano, a Cytron controller, like the MD13, that's what, 13 amps? You know, it will pull 20 or 30 amps. When I originally had the drill motor, that MD13 was pulling 30, 40 amps. It got hot, but it just shows you the kind of quality that little hobby part is. If you can pull 2 or 3 times the amps, I mean, I was driving along, the thing was steaming. It was so hot, but it didn't crap out, which is amazing. So it's a good, reliable board, and some basic resistor type input protection, and we're good to go. And a PC board. And then, I don't know if you guys know, but I've been speaking with the RU Simple guys. And maybe they can, or them or another company can actually make the board, supply the parts, and it can be a kit. I don't know. You know, like if you could have everything in a bag and you just put it together, DIY assemble kit is different than a ready-made kit, because it's a hobby, right? So you don't have the same rules as something that you buy in a complete box. So we'd have a parts list, a simple schematic, hook your USB to it, hook your motor to it, and away you go. That would be my vote. And then we can have really simple documentation. We can have a simple YouTube video that explains how to put it together, how to use it, how to set it up. And as Andrew said, Bob's your uncle.
I think that's fantastic. I'm fully on board with the Arduino part of it. I just started getting in, making a fuel gauge for fuel tanks and a time temperature recorder. Like it's very versatile that way, just to get into. And like my son is starting to get the bug for that kind of stuff. So I think that's really important. And I think it's good to pick that as the standard. And as far as making a kit, does that violate our disclaimer?
Anyone here a lawyer?
Not a lawyer, but if we don't advertise the kit for using on real life tractors, you could also using to simulate how a steering wheel would rotate. So something like the Formula One kits for the PC. So, well, if someone hooks a real motor to this, oh, sorry, we didn't know that. I'd talked once with a small German company about the PCB because, as I posted, it's 2 or 3 people that approached me and asked, well, might we get one? And I took a look at the German regulations, and they are ugly. Not mainly because of the thing of selling a whole kit, because if I put the ESP by side, it won't be a complete kit and whatever. But we have some regulation for old electronic hardware, and more or less it mandates if I sell only one PCB, I had to register at some kind of agency and putting almost 1,000 euros a year away. So, well, it's ugly. But they said also we might talk about producing this I/O extension board for other people. So, yeah, I think getting some sort of kit, or if you advertise it as not as a steering kit, but as some sort of I/O extension boards or whatever, it's no real problem. And if someone finds somewhere on the internet some kind of software that's doing crazy stuff with this hardware, well, you only sold some basic hardware. I think that it's not the main problem, as long you don't start selling pre-programmed microcontrollers or whatever. So it's just, if people just hook up the thing and it should run, then it's getting tricky. But if they have to do really stuff on their own and you don't advertise it really as at the point of sale as being using for this special use case, I think it's quite fine.
Yeah. Further to that, Andres, like a company like Fidgets, you could sell the board, or you make the board, and you could call it a potentiometer-based motor position control board. Because that's all it is. That's all auto steer is you having your wheel angle sensor, and it doesn't have any software on, but it's got the input for a potentiometer, and it's got a motor driver board. You don't mention the fact that it's AgOpenGPS. Oh, by the way, it happens to work with AgOpenGPS. So there certainly is ways around it. And I was thinking of phoning companies like Fidgets, because some of these companies are worldwide, and then you have access like all over the world to their kit.
Is it really necessary to produce a dedicated PCB? As you mentioned before, you want to have a Arduino-based, very simple system. So just the Arduino, the motor controller, and some wires. Actually, for that, we don't really need a PCB.
I would agree, but I think a PCB, even if it's only used for connecting the connectors, has some advantages. So it's a bit more robust, again, shaking some cable loose, and it looks way cleaner, and you might use smaller boxes where you put all your stuff. So I see some advantages. And I think the most important advantage is it looks less scary to new users if you tell them you just put these 3 parts on this PCB and then hook up these 5 wires. If I've shown my brother-in-law some of the pictures of the people having self-made setups, and he didn't say something, but it was very clear in his eyes that I would say such a cable mess, he wouldn't trust himself to do it. So he said, well, maybe you can help me, but if you don't have someone to help him, he wouldn't try it because it looks scary. Even if it's basically quite simple, just follow the schematic and you're fine. But if you see a large box full of cable and electronic things, it's scary to many users. So I think that's one of the main advantages. If you have some PCB, it's quite simple. Put this on place A, put this on place B, and then hook up the cables. And you can even print some nice names where you put on the cables, and it doesn't look so scary, even if it's don't change really really much in functionality. Only, yeah, of course, cables might get easier loose, and it's maybe more fun to find the problem. But I think the most important thing is to reduce the anxiety to try it at least. So I think that would be the main advantage of a PCB, that it looks easier to do.
It's also much more reliable. If you have all those wires and connectors, and you know, a tractor is a horrible, harsh environment, bouncing around in dust, and the less connections you have, certainly the more reliable it is.
What do you want to add to the standard setting? Do you want to add the ADS, the analog digital converter for exact wheel angle?
I would say no. Just use the 10-bit. That's all I use. The key there is a nice clean power supply, and then it's actually 11-bit because we're sampling it 4 times, and then divide by 2, and then that gives you the extra bit. And there's plenty of time to do multiple samples, well, multi-sampling, and then so that gives you 11 bits right there. And is it worth it for 1 extra bit to put the board on and that extra complexity? I don't think so.
I use it for the factory built-in steer angel sensor, so I really need it in because it's more safe for the electric of the tractor.
Because of the differential input.
Yeah.
But I would say if you would say we might document 2 setups, I would say for the very simple setup, I would say external steering angel sensor and integrated AD, because it's basically more simple. If you start building a PCB, we can argue about putting ADS on it or not. But if we stay with the basic Arduino connection setup, I would say for the simple setup, keep it as simple as possible, because attaching wires to built-in sensors is also something I would say many people would be wary of. Putting some additional $30 sensor near the axle is something else. It's easy. You can find some pictures. It's more or less the same for every kind of tractor. Not a question if this model is equipped with this type of sensor or not, or whatever. And of course, for some sort of advanced setup, I would say we should support something like the ADS, and of course in the future. And I think the UDP, I hope at least the UDP part will be supported in the future too, because I really like it and will build the PCB with the ESP using the UDP part. But I think for the documented, keep it simple setup, I would say keep it as simple as possible. So the entry is quite low, and if the people have set up it and well, decide I want something more complicated, then they can hopefully start reading more in the documentation, maybe in the source code or where, and get more complicated setups. But I think for the basic setup, you should keep it as simple as possible. So if someone has trouble, it's easier to tell him, well, take some sort of multimeter and take a look how many volts are going in the inputs, then telling him to debug some I2C bus logic between the two small PCBs. So I think for the basic documented stuff, really keep it really simple. Even I would say, well, I built a way more complicated PCB, but I would say I'm not the average user. I'm very big. I have a PhD in computer science. I'm not an average user. So what I think is simple, it's not a real reference.
Maybe to Matthias's point though, if you are a new user and you have a tractor that already has a steer sensor on it, that does take some complexity out of it, right? If you can just tap into that existing steer sensor and hook it into that 80S115, that might simplify things a little bit, but it also does add complexity to the board, I guess.
Well, the advantage of the 12-bit or 16-bit converter is that it's I2C, so it's really simple to add to the board, and if it's not on the board, it doesn't affect anything either. So if it's going to be a PC board, it's probably worthwhile to have the real estate for that chip on it. Absolutely. This is a little off topic, but to further, I've been in conversation with, let's call it a company. They've been finding that their customers have been buying a lot of GPS units for AgOpenGPS. So they were very excited when I emailed them, and they asked me, well, what do you need for agriculture? And I said, you know what would be great is if you could put an inertial measurement unit and, you know, a magnetic sensor on there, and you could have a good steady heading. And then they said to me, well, we've been thinking about putting 2 antennas, 2 F9Ps, and synchronizing them so that you can have dual antenna with heading, tilt, and roll and pitch. And then on their board, they would generate a sentence that AgOpenGPS would be able to parse, like to decipher. So figure about 6-8 months from now, it's going to change. And they're talking about what kind of case do you want to put it in and what kind of box. And so they're talking about a dual antenna, full RTK, sub-centimeter accurate, with an AgOpenGPS friendly NMEA sentence as well for like $1,500. So the future will be changing again, but not everyone wants to put a dual antenna on. So having a spot for that MMA, that thing works really, really well, by the way. I don't know who, I think it was Vader who originally found it. Like that's a great little chip. But man, the technology certainly isn't going to stand still either. And I'm really excited to see this dual antenna setup, because now you can drive forwards and you can drive backwards and still know you're heading exactly with 2 antennas. At 1.5 meter width of an antenna, you're talking 1/10 of a degree of heading. So, and of course, as you know, AgOpenGPS uses that pure pursuit. So heading is very, very critical, which has been just a nightmare to figure out how to do. So yeah, I mean, we could build a board today, but maybe some of this, the new antennas and new GPS stuff will eliminate half the parts again on the board. But I think just an MMA, the ADS, Nano set up so that you could use the Nano and use that ENC UDP adapter on top, and pretty simple, and a motor driver board. So is that what we're going to go with for a basic board?
I would certainly agree with that. To me, having a basic reference that we can document would be awfully valuable. Even though we're going to continue to experiment, it gives that common denominator that we haven't had.
Okay, so I'll propose a schematic. I'll throw together a schematic, and then we'll come up with a reference design.
I have a question. Coming back to you, you mentioned the heading and the driving backwards. I actually tested the B&O cap on the rooftop and the MA in another box, and it worked very well. And I saw when I go backwards, the heading is of the B&O is still in the right direction. So I think it would be possible to add a backward driving feature by using the B&O, and software should be smart that the software sees that I'm driving backwards. When I do no turn, it should be backwards. That's the logic.
Well, let me know when you got the code done. The trouble with the B&O, like I say, the heading is a nightmare. So what it does is it takes the heading from the GPS, and then that's kind of like a low pass filter. So it constantly corrects what the B&O says. I know you might notice that the B&O says 180 degrees, and you're actually heading in a direction of 30. And so what it does is it keeps taking that error and chunking it down so that it eventually matches the heading of the GPS. So the whole software, if you started backing up now, then now you're going 180 degrees the other way. So now it sees an error of 180 degrees, so then it'll go 180, 150, 120, and eventually it'll spin the thing around and then match the heading that the GPS is taking. And the GPS doesn't know if it's going forward or backwards, so it's still wrong. And now you'd have to detect whether or not you're in reverse of the tractor and then add 180 degrees to it. But as soon as you turn around and start backing up, then it will correct itself, it'll try to remove that error, and then you're still 180 out. Every company that you mention, tractor and heading, it just gives them cold sweats because nobody knows how to do it, including the car industry. The car industry, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the self-driving car videos on YouTube. When they're going like 3 or 4 kilometers an hour, the steering wheel's doing this. The car has to be going, 30 kilometers an hour before you get any sort of straight heading. And that's still a problem that they're struggling with, is the speeds we go all day is heading and accurate heading. And as far as I know, the only way to do it is dual antenna for an accurate heading and RTK. Because if you don't have RTK and GPS, then your fixes start to bounce around a little bit. Your heading is doing this, and then Pure Pursuit's doing this, and now your wheels are doing this, and you're screwed. So heading is, man, is it complicated. That's one of the most complicated pain in the neck parts of AgOpenGPS, is dealing with heading and what direction am I going. So yeah, Matt, there's no easy answers there at all. It's beyond complicated for my little brain anyway. Well, and apparently every other engineer in the world.
I would say, from a computer science point of view, if you have some structure which you don't have on some sort of field, you might use some sort of camera to correct the GPS drift, because if you compare different pictures and you have some sort of objects that keeps the same, you can say, especially for low speeds, you can detect if you're drifting to left or to right. But then you get in the next really, really ugly box of image processing. And believe me or not, you don't want to do image processing just for heading. You're getting in two new nightmares for avoiding another one. So I would say it won't be worse, because yeah, it's using much computing power, and yeah, you have tons of problems to solve, because every sort of field with low fruits or after plowing or would be a new problem for your image processing, and I don't think that is really worse. So for the cars, it might help, because you have usually the white lane stripes on the left or the right, but on the field, well, they aren't so nicely structured than most of the streets.
I think the heading you do with the low pass filter is working very good. You've invented this about a year ago, and yeah, I think it works great.
It works good enough for $3, put it that way.
So the next impossible thing is driving backwards.
And Reed's Shep and all that business.
Oh my God.
I didn't say it.
42 combinations instead of 6 for Lubens.
So we've got, I think I'm going to close down the meeting in about 5 minutes here. That way we've done an hour, so we got 20 minutes free. I think if it's okay with you guys, I'll post this meeting up on YouTube. If you don't want it posted up there, maybe I can blank out your screen or censor it or something, but just let me know via chat on the chat box here if that's something you want to do. Otherwise, I'm gonna just put it up there and then post it on Combine Forum, and everybody can have access to it just to kind of see what we've talked about. And I know, Andrew, it's getting almost 1 in the morning for you, so thanks for joining us in Australia. I'm wondering, is this a good time for you guys to do in future, or would you like to push it off for 2 hours? Like, I'd prefer 2 hours later from now, but if this works good for everybody, I'm happy with this meeting too. So just let me know, I guess. Let me know via email or on the forum or whatever you want to do there. Is there anything else that we should kind of touch on in the last couple minutes here before we call it quits for today?
I just want to suggest an additional feature. When I seen a new Fed tractor with built-in GPS, they can do 2 tools, one in the front and one in the rear, and the coverage map is has 2 colors, 2 different colors. So the tractor can handle those 2 tools completely separate.
I actually had a guy from our local Fendt dealership trying to sell me a Fendt yesterday, but he comes at it from a different angle. He was on the tech side, so he was a mechanic first, just turned salesman, but super interested in AgOpenGPS. He kind of came over just for that reason, just to see the setup. And he's probably not allowed to, but he was saying he's interested in doing a CAN trace, as far as tracing the CAN bus on an existing Fendt by just seeing what messages are being sent for the steering system, to see if that in future we could maybe, speak the same language as a Fendt tractor. But that would be a whole different kettle of fish. So I think that's incredibly cool, though, that you have separate coverage maps on the new Fendts. So that's pretty cool.
One of the other things I've been kicking around is variable rate, and how can a guy do variable rate without being so freaking complicated and without relying on cloud data and other companies. And the more I think about it, using topography for VR, as most soil scientists agree, and just being able to make a map in Paint, believe it or not, if you have your border, and then being able to import that image into AgOpenGPS and then setting rate based on your little image. Because we all know our fields. We all know where it lodges and where it's crappy and where it's good. And we don't have to go every square inch changing the air seeder, but we know where generally we want to seed stuff and what rates we want to seed them. So it's been the idea I've been kicking around for a little bit here, and I'm thinking it should be totally doable, because just like section control, we know where we've been and we know where we have gone. So we'll just pick another color and we'll know what rate we should put on. So I never have enough time to do anything, it seems, but I think that that's pretty intriguing. So who knows what'll show up someday.
I'm very excited about that. That sounds awesome.
Has anyone dealt with the application and coverage maps that are free, and they are generated by satellites, and you can download to your computer and use it for application?
I've just played around with the free maps, but I haven't actually done any application with them. Someone on the forum posted that a while ago. Maybe it was you, Matthias, about where to make free prescription maps. But essentially, it was just, it sees this color painted on the field, so I'm going to put out this rate. It sees this color, I'm going to put out this rate. But that's my very simple understanding of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've used Photoshop or that sort of thing, but you can have multiple layers in Photoshop. And so you could import yield maps, you could import soil test results, what's it called, elevation maps, that sort of thing. You can turn on, turn off layers, and then just hand create a fairly simple prescription map, just using something like Photoshop or any of the, or GIMP. I mean, it's free. It's open source and it's free. So none of this needs to cost a lot. So, and then of course there's shape files and all this other stuff. You know, that's a whole another world. I need to speak to Johannes. He put in shape files in Farmer GPS. So, and there's actually free open source software on how to deal with shape files. So, yeah, they're complicated. It's a lot more reading, but who knows? But I definitely want to say thanks again, guys, for putting up with my horrible software. Sometimes I think it is. But I've always tried to keep it really simple. And as you can see, I'm a simple thinker. I'm a simple person. So I like the software to reflect that. And we're officially at 22,000 lines of code. So when you make one change in one place, it can be affect many others. So I'm getting more and more reluctant to make changes, because it can really turn into a nightmare in a hurry. So again, thank you for your patience.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I speak for everybody saying that we very much appreciate what you've done, Brian. This has just been fun for everyone. All right, I think unless there's any last things, we're gonna say bye for this meeting for now. So thank you all for joining us in the inaugural AgOpenGPS video meeting. And Zoom was kind enough to give us a couple extra minutes to finish up. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to doing this again in the very near future.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.